The rain-soaked streets of Portland gleamed under the streetlights, but I was running late, heart pounding, my phone buzzing with a text I didn't dare read. I was supposed to meet him, the guy from the app, the one with the charming bio and a smile that promised more than I'd ever let myself hope for. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. My name is Julian Carter, 26, a graphic designer scraping by in a city that felt both too big and too small. I'd moved to Portland from a small town in Georgia, chasing freedom, chasing myself. Growing up black and queer in a place where both were whispered about like sins had left scars I was still learning to wear proudly. Tonight was supposed to be a step forward. A date with Theo, a 27-year-old barista with a knack for poetry and a profile that screamed, safe bet. But as I ducked into the dimly lit bar on Burnside Street, I realized I'd walked into something entirely different. The bar was a cozy chaos of mismatched furniture and fairy lights, the kind of place where hipsters and dreamers collided over craft beer. My eyes scanned the crowd for Theo's red beanie, but instead, they landed on a guy sitting alone at the counter. He was Latino, maybe 25, with dark curls falling into his eyes and a leather jacket slung over the back of his stool. He was nursing a whiskey, his fingers tapping a rhythm only he could hear. Something about him felt magnetic. Dangerous, maybe. I checked my phone. Theo's text. Running late. Be there in 20. I sighed, pocketed my phone, and, against my better judgment, slid onto the stool next to the stranger. You look like you're waiting for someone who's not coming, he said without looking up, his voice low and warm, like he'd known me forever. I laughed, caught off guard. That obvious, huh? He turned, and his eyes, deep brown, flecked with gold, hit me like a punch. I'm good at reading people, he said, a half-smile tugging at his lips. Name's Mateo. You, Julian, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. And I'm waiting for someone who's just late, not ghosting me. Yet. Mateo chuckled, raising his glass. To late dates and bad decisions. I clinked my water glass against his, already feeling the night slipping out of my control. We talked easy like we'd done this 100 times. He was a musician, he said, playing gigs at small venues, living out of a van half the time. His life was the opposite of mine. Untethered, reckless, alive in a way I envied. He told me about the time he buskied in Seattle for 3 days straight, sleeping on a park bench, and I told him about the time I redesigned a client's logo 5 times because they couldn't decide between blue and slightly bluer. He laughed, loud and unapologetic, and I felt something loosen in my chest. 20 minutes came and went. Theo texted again. Stuck in traffic. 10 more minutes? I glanced at Mateo, who was watching me with that same half-smile, like he knew something I didn't. Your guy's not coming, he said, not unkindly. He is, I insisted, but doubt crept in. I ordered a drink, a gin and tonic, because I needed something to steady my nerves. Mateo leaned closer, his shoulder brushing mine, and asked about my art. I showed him a sketch on my phone, a piece I'd done of a boy staring at a horizon he'd never reach. That's you, isn't it? He said, not a question. I froze, exposed, but he just nodded like he got it, like he saw me. The bar grew louder, the air thicker with laughter and clinking glasses, but it felt like we were in our own world. He told me about his first love, a boy in high school who broke his heart when their town wasn't ready for them. I told him about mine, a crush I never acted on because fear was louder than desire. We were strangers, but every word felt like a confession, raw and unguarded. Then my phone buzzed. Theo here. Where you at? My stomach dropped. I looked at Matteo, who raised an eyebrow. Your guy? Yeah, I said, but my feet didn't move. I didn't want to leave this stool, this conversation, this feeling. Matteo tilted his head, like he was daring me to stay. You don't owe him anything, he said softly, but you owe yourself something real. I stared at him, heart racing. Theo was the plan, safe, predictable, the kind of guy I was supposed to want. Matteo was a risk, a beautiful, terrifying risk. I typed a quick reply to Theo. Sorry, something came up. Then I turned off my phone. Matteo's smile widened, and he stood, tossing a few bills on the counter. Come on, he said. Let's get out of here. I followed him into the night, the rain now a soft drizzle, the city alive with possibility. We walked, no destination, just the rhythm of our steps and the hum of something unspoken between us. He led me to a small park, where the trees swayed in the breeze and the stars peeked through the clouds. We sat on a bench, and he pulled out a battered guitar from a case I hadn't noticed he was carrying. He played a melody soft, haunting, like it was written for this moment. I watched his fingers move, watched the way his eyes closed when he hit a certain note, and I felt something shift inside me. Play something for me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked at me, his gaze steady. Only if you tell me something true. I swallowed, my throat tight. I've spent my whole life pretending I'm okay with being alone. But I'm not. He didn't say anything, just played. The notes wrapped around us, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe, like I was enough. The park was a pocket of quiet in the city's pulse, the kind of place where secrets felt safe. Matteo's guitar rested against the bench now, its strings catching the faint glow of a street lamp. We sat close, our knees almost touching, the air between us electric with something I couldn't name but didn't want to lose. So, Matteo said, his voice low, teasing, you ditch your date for a guy you just met. Bold move, Julian. I laughed, but it came out shaky. I don't even know what I'm doing right now. Good, he said, leaning back, his eyes glinting with mischief. That's when the best stuff happens. I wanted to ask what he meant, but he was already moving, standing and pulling me up with him. Come on, he said. I want to show you something. His hand lingered on mine for a second too long, warm and sure, before he let go. I followed him through the park, past a fountain that shimmered under the moonlight, to a small hill overlooking the city. Portland's skyline stretched out before us. Neon signs, towering buildings, and the faint outline of Mount Hood in the distance. It was beautiful, but it was Matteo's expression that held me. Open, unguarded, like he was sharing a piece of his soul. This is my spot, he said, sitting on the grass. When life gets too loud, I come here. Reminds me there's still something bigger than all the noise. I sat beside him, the damp grass cool beneath my palms. You don't strike me as someone who runs from noise. He smirked, but there was a shadow in his eyes. You'd be surprised. I've been running my whole life. I wanted to ask more, but something in his tone told me to wait. Instead, I told him about Georgia, about the church sermons that made me feel small, about sneaking out at night to draw under the stars because it was the only time I felt free. He listened, really listened, his head tilted like every word mattered. Then he told me about growing up in a small town in New Mexico, where his family loved him but didn't know how to love all of him. I came out at 17, he said. My dad didn't speak to me for a year, still working on that one. His honesty disarmed me. I wasn't used to this. Someone laying their truth bare without hesitation. How do you do that? I asked. Just say it like it's nothing? "It's not nothing," he said, his voice soft but firm. "It's just who I am. Took me a long time to get here, though." We sat in silence for a while, the city humming below us. I felt the weight of my own walls, the ones I'd built to keep people out, to keep myself safe. But sitting here with Matteo, they felt less necessary, less permanent. "Tell me something else true," he said, echoing his earlier challenge. I hesitated, my heart thudding. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Scared of wanting something I can't have. Scared of this." I gestured between us, the air thick with unspoken possibility. He didn't laugh or brush it off. Instead, he reached for my hand, his fingers intertwining with mine. "Fear's just a sign you're alive," he said. "Means you're feeling something real." My breath caught. His touch was grounding, but it set my nerves on fire. I wanted to pull away, to run back to the safety of my predictable life, but I didn't, couldn't. Instead, I leaned closer, our shoulders brushing, and asked, "What are you scared of?" He looked out at the city, his jaw tight. "That I'll keep running forever. That I'll never find a place or a person worth staying for." The vulnerability in his voice cracked something open in me. I turned to face him, our eyes locking, and for a moment, the world fell away. No city, no past, no fear, just us. Then his phone buzzed, shattering the moment. He glanced at it, his expression darkening. "Everything okay?" I asked. He shoved the phone back in his pocket. "Just my ex keeps texting me about some gig I bailed on." "Your ex?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. Matteo sighed, running a hand through his curls. "Yeah, Diego. We were together for 2 years. Broke up a few months ago. He's complicated." I nodded, trying to ignore the pang in my chest. "Complicated how?" "He's the kind of guy who loves you until it's inconvenient," Matteo said, his voice edged with bitterness. "Thought I could fix him. Turns out you can't fix someone who doesn't want to be fixed." I wanted to say something comforting, but words felt inadequate. Instead, I squeezed his hand, and he squeezed back. We stayed like that, hands clasped, until the first rays of dawn crept over the horizon. The night had slipped away, but it felt like we'd lived a lifetime in those hours. "Come on," Matteo said, standing and pulling me up. "Let's get breakfast. I know a place." We walked to a 24-hour diner, a greasy spoon with neon signs and a jukebox that played old soul tunes. Over pancakes and coffee, we talked about everything and nothing. Our favorite books, the worst gigs he'd ever played, the time I accidentally set my kitchen on fire trying to cook for a date. Every story felt like a thread weaving us closer together. But as the sun rose higher, reality crept in. My phone buzzed with a voicemail from Theo, his voice laced with confusion and hurt. I didn't listen to it. Couldn't. Not yet. Matteo noticed my unease and tilted his head. "Regretting ditching your guy?" "No," I said too quickly. "But this wasn't supposed to happen." "Maybe it was," he said, his eyes searching mine. "Maybe the universe knew you needed something real tonight." I wanted to believe him, but as we left the diner, the weight of the night, of Matteo, of Theo, of my own fears, settled heavy on my shoulders. I didn't know what came next, but I knew I wasn't ready to let this go. The diner's neon glow faded behind us as we stepped back into the morning light, the city waking up around us. Matteo walked with an easy stride, like he belonged to the streets, while I felt like I was floating, caught between the thrill of the night and the uncertainty of what came next. My hand brushed his as we walked, and neither of us pulled away. "Where to now?" I asked, my voice lighter than I felt. Mateo grinned, a spark in his eyes. "You're not tired of me yet?" "Not even close," I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. He led me to a small record shop tucked between a coffee house and a thrift store. The bell above the door jingled as we stepped inside, greeted by the smell of vinyl and old wood. The shop was a maze of crates, each filled with records that told stories of their own. Mateo moved through the aisles with purpose, pulling out a worn copy of Marvin Gaye's What's Going On. "This," he said, holding it up, "is what got me through high school." I took the record, my fingers tracing the faded cover. "My mom used to play this," I said, the memory catching me off guard. "She'd dance around the kitchen, singing off-key. I'd pretend to be embarrassed, but I loved it." Mateo's smile softened. "Sounds like a good mom." "She was," I said, my throat tight. "She passed when I was 19. Cancer." He didn't say anything, just put a hand on my shoulder, his touch steady. It was enough. We spent an hour flipping through records, sharing stories about the music that shaped us. He told me about the first time he heard Nina Simone, how her voice made him feel like he could survive anything. I told him about sneaking my mom's Stevie Wonder albums to my room, dreaming of a life bigger than my small town. As we left the shop, a record under each of our arms, Mateo's phone buzzed again. He ignored it, but I saw the tension in his jaw. "Diego again?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Yeah," he said, his voice clipped. "He's not great at letting go." I wanted to ask more, but the moment felt fragile. Instead, we wandered to a nearby food cart pod, grabbing tacos and sitting on a picnic table under a string of colorful lights. The air was crisp, the kind of autumn morning that made you feel alive. Mateo was quieter now, his usual confidence dimmed. I nudged his foot under the table. "You okay?" He looked at me, his eyes searching. "I don't usually do this," he said. "Spend a whole night with someone. Talk like this. It's a lot." "For me too," I admitted. "But it's good, isn't it?" He nodded, but there was a flicker of doubt in his expression. "I just don't want to screw this up, you know? I'm not exactly known for sticking around." The words hung between us, heavy with implication. I wanted to tell him I wasn't going anywhere, but my own fears stopped me. Instead, I said, "Then don't. Stay." He looked at me like I'd said something impossible, then laughed softly. "Your trouble, Julian Carter." We finished our tacos, the conversation lighter now, but the weight of his words lingered. As we walked back toward the city center, my phone buzzed again. Another voicemail from Theo. I sighed, shoving it in my pocket. Mateo noticed but didn't push. Instead, he grabbed my hand, pulling me toward a street performer playing a violin. The music was haunting, a melody that seemed to weave our night together. "Dance with me," Mateo said, his voice half teasing, half serious. "Here." I glanced around at the small crowd, my cheeks warming. "People are watching. Let them," he said, pulling me closer. His hands settled on my waist, and I let mine rest on his shoulders. We swayed, awkward at first, then easier, the music guiding us. I could feel the eyes on us, but for once, I didn't care. I was here with him, and it felt like enough. The song ended, and the crowd clapped, but Mateo didn't let go. "You're braver than you think," he whispered, his breath warm against my ear. I wanted to believe him, but the weight of the voicemails of Theo, of my own doubts, pressed against me. As we walked away, Mateo's phone buzzed again, and this time he answered it. I couldn't hear the conversation, but his face tightened, his voice low and sharp. When he hung up, he looked at me apologetic. Diego's at my van. Says he needs to talk. Now? I asked, my stomach twisting. Yeah, he said, running a hand through his hair. I'm sorry, Julian. I need to deal with this. I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment. Want me to come with you? He hesitated, then shook his head. This is something I need to do alone. But I'll find you after. Okay? Okay, I said, but doubt crept in. He gave me a quick hug, his arms strong and warm, then jogged off toward the riverfront. I stood there, alone in the morning light, the city moving around me. My phone felt heavy in my pocket. Theo's voicemails a reminder of the life I'd left behind last night. I didn't know what Mateo's ex wanted, or if he'd come back, but I knew one thing. This night had changed me, and there was no going back. The morning air felt colder without Mateo's presence. The city's hum less vibrant. I wandered toward the waterfront, my thoughts a tangle of hope and uncertainty. Last night had been a whirlwind, a collision of chance and truth that left me raw, exposed, and strangely alive. But now, with Mateo gone to face his past and Theo's voicemails unanswered, I felt like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't quite grasp. I found a bench by the Willamette River, the water glinting under the rising sun. I finally listened to Theo's messages. His voice was soft, confused, tinged with hurt. Julian, I don't know what happened last night, but I was really looking forward to meeting you. If I did something wrong, just tell me. The second message was shorter, more resigned. Hope you're okay. Let me know if you want to talk. Guilt twisted in my gut. Theo hadn't done anything wrong. He was the safe choice, the guy I'd planned for, the one who fit the life I thought I wanted. But Mateo, he was the opposite. Unpredictable, unguarded, real in a way that scared me as much as it drew me in. I stared at my phone, my thumb hovering over Theo's number, but I couldn't bring myself to call. Instead, I walked. Portland's streets were waking up, vendors setting up at the Saturday market, joggers weaving through the crowds. I ended up at a small coffee shop, the kind with mismatched mugs and baristas who looked like they'd just rolled out of bed. I ordered a latte and sat by the window, sketching on a napkin. A rough outline of Mateo's guitar, his hands, the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed. Drawing had always been my way of making sense of the world, but now it felt like I was trying to hold onto something fleeting. My phone buzzed with a text from Mateo. Hey, sorry about earlier. Diego's gone. Can I see you? My heart leapt, but doubt lingered. What was this thing between us? A moment? A mistake? I texted back. Where are you? He replied with an address. A small music venue a few blocks away. I paid for my coffee and headed out, the napkin sketch tucked in my pocket. The venue was a dive bar with a stage barely big enough for a drum set. Mateo was there, tuning his guitar, his leather jacket slung over a chair. He looked up when I walked in, his face breaking into a smile that made my chest ache. You came, he said, like he hadn't been sure I would. You asked, I said, trying to sound casual. Everything okay with Diego? He set the guitar down, his expression clouding. He wanted to get back together. Said he's changed. But I've heard that before. And? I asked, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. And I told him no, Mateo said, his eyes meeting mine. I'm done going backward. Relief flooded me, but it was tinged with fear. So what now? He stepped closer, his voice low. Now I'm here, with you, if you want that. I did. God, I did. But the weight of the night, of Theo, of my own insecurities, pressed against me. I don't know how to do this, I admitted. I don't even know what this is. Mateo's hand found mine, his touch steady. It's just us, Julian. No rules, no plans. Just us. I wanted to believe it could be that simple. He pulled me toward the stage, handing me a spare guitar. Play with me, he said, his grin infectious. I laughed, protesting that I hadn't touched a guitar since middle school. But he insisted. We messed around, strumming chords that didn't quite match, laughing when I hit a wrong note. For a moment, it was just us, the music, the possibility. But then the door swung open, and a guy walked in, tall, broad-shouldered, with a face that carried the kind of charm that could break hearts. Diego. I knew it before Mateo even said his name. His presence filled the room, commanding attention. Mateo's smile faded, his body tensing. Diego, he said, his voice flat. What are you doing here? I heard you were playing tonight, Diego said, his eyes flicking to me, sizing me up. Thought I'd come support. Mateo's jaw tightened. You don't need to be here. Diego's smile was sharp, calculated. Come on, Matt. We're still friends, right? The air felt thick, charged with history I could only guess at. I stood there, feeling like an intruder, my hands still gripping the guitar. Diego's gaze lingered on me, and I saw the challenge in it. Who's this? He asked, his tone deceptively casual. Julian, Mateo said, stepping closer to me. He's with me. Diego's smile didn't falter, but his eyes hardened. Cool. Just don't break his heart, yeah? You're good at that. The words hit like a slap. Mateo flinched, but he didn't back down. You don't get to say that, he said, his voice low, dangerous. Not after everything. Diego raised his hands, mock surrender. Just looking out for the guy. He turned to me, his smile almost kind. Watch yourself, Julian. He's not as good as he seems. He left, the door slamming behind him. Mateo let out a shaky breath, his hands clenched into fists. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I reached for his hand, my fingers brushing his. You okay? I asked. He nodded, but his eyes were distant. I'm sorry you had to see that. Don't be, I said. I'm here. He looked at me, his expression softening. Yeah, you are. We didn't play anymore. Instead, we sat in the back of the venue, sharing a beer and talking about anything but Diego. But his shadow lingered, a reminder that the past wasn't as far away as we wanted it to be. As the afternoon faded into evening, I knew we were heading toward something bigger, something that could either break us or make us whole. The venue filled up as evening settled over Portland, the crowd a mix of locals and travelers drawn to the promise of live music. Mateo was scheduled to perform, and I stayed, my nerves a mix of excitement and unease. Diego's words echoed in my head, but Mateo's presence, his quiet strength, his unguarded smile, kept me grounded. I found a spot near the stage, my sketchbook open in my lap, drawing the curve of his jaw as he sound-checked his guitar. He took the stage, the spotlight catching the gold in his eyes. His voice was raw, soulful, each note carrying the weight of his story. The crowd swayed, captivated, but I couldn't take my eyes off him. He sang about love, about loss, about finding something worth fighting for. I wondered if he was singing to me. Halfway through his set, he paused, his eyes finding mine in the crowd. This one's for someone who reminded me what it feels like to be seen, he said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. The crowd cheered, but it felt like he was speaking only to me. The song was soft, haunting, a melody that felt like the night we'd shared. My chest tightened, tears pricking my eyes. I'd never felt so exposed, so understood. After his set, he found me in the crowd, his face flushed with adrenaline. "What did you think?" he asked, his grin boyish, hopeful. "I think you're incredible," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. He laughed, pulling me into a hug. "You're not so bad yourself." We left the venue, the night air cool against our skin. We walked back to the park where we'd sat earlier, the stars brighter now, the city quieter. We sat on the same bench, our shoulders touching, the silence between us comfortable but heavy with unspoken questions. "I meant what I said up there," Matteo said finally, his voice soft. "You make me want to stop running." My heart raced, but fear crept in. "What happens when you get scared again?" I asked. "When Diego or someone else shows up, reminding you of all the reasons you run?" He looked at me, his eyes steady. "I don't know, but I know I want to try. With you." I wanted to believe him, but my own fears were loud. I thought of Theo, of the safe life I could have, of the risks of letting myself fall for someone like Matteo, someone who lived on the edge, who might break my heart. But then I thought of the night we'd shared, the way he'd seen me, the way he'd made me feel alive. "I'm scared too," I admitted, "but I don't want to go back to pretending." He reached for my hand, his fingers intertwining with mine. "Then let's be scared together." We sat there, hands clasped, the city stretching out before us. I thought of my mom, of the way she danced in the kitchen, fearless in her joy. I thought of the boy I'd been, hiding who I was, and the man I was becoming, brave enough to want more. Matteo wasn't the guy I'd planned to meet, but he was the one who'd shown me what it meant to be honest, with him, with myself. The next morning I called Theo. I apologized, explained that I'd met someone, that I needed to follow where it led. He was gracious, kinder than I deserved. "Be happy, Julian," he said, and I promised myself I'd try. Matteo and I didn't make any grand promises. We didn't need to. We had breakfast at the diner again, laughed over burnt toast, and made plans to meet the next night. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was messy, uncertain, real, but it was ours. As I walked home, my sketchbook heavy with drawings of him, I realized that sometimes the wrong guy is the one who changes everything. Matteo wasn't perfect, and neither was I. But in that one night, we'd found something honest, something worth fighting for. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be.